Welcome back to the final episode of me putting in my big fuel tank. This episode is twice as long as the others. It's half an hour long. Sorry, I tried to make it 15 minutes, just couldn't do it. It didn't make sense. So sit back, enjoy, and thanks for watching. Welcome back to the hangar. Another day and some more work on the Challenger 2 Ultralight. I've finished installing the fuel tank, and what I'm working on now is the fuel system and all the electrical connections for the fuel level sending unit. That's your fuel level probe, tells how full your gas tank is. I've installed a fuel pressure sensor so I can monitor the fuel pressure. That was some interesting developments on that, and I'll show you with the plumbing that I've done. And the fuel flow sensor. I ordered my EIS from Grand Rapids with the fuel flow option, so I can measure how much fuel is going through, and with the totalizer, kind of like with your car that says, when you fill up your gas tank, it says you've got, a 600-mile range, and, when you're down to like a 100-mile range, whatever. So, yeah, the fuel, it measures the fuel flow. So all those have been installed. I need to wire them up. And so this is what this video is going to be, is the wiring up of all the stuff in the back. But follow me and I'll show you what had to be done. First off, the fuel sending unit, pardon this is the vent hose for the tank, just needs to be strapped up. This is the fuel level sending unit. It's a capacitive probe. There's a rod going down to the very bottom, and anyways, it measures the fuel, and it has to be calibrated a little bit, and it has these wires that need to be hooked up. There's power, of course, red and the black. There's the yellow, which, of course, goes to the EFIS or the EIS. I'm not sure which one I'm wiring it into. I'll let you know in a minute, or actually, I'll put it down at the bottom of the description where it's getting wired to. And then what I did not realize when I ordered this model was it came with an alarm output. And the factory sets this for 10%. So when the fuel level is at 10%, it trips or sends a current out through this green wire, which can be used to light up a light of some sort, which I am going to utilize. To tell you that you've got low fuel. So, bonus, didn't know that. And I ordered this from Aircraft Spruce, and took quite a while to get here. Literally 2 months, a little over 2 months, because they were out of stock, and I don't know. Anyways, nice looking unit, standard, bolts down, 4 wires, which will be going to the back, and hooked up with the rest of the wiring. So follow me. And we go to the back of the aircraft, and I'll swing this camera around, and there we go. This is what we're looking at so far. Let's look up top. Here's the wiring that I mentioned from the fuel sending unit. It needs to be tied into this wiring harness here. Here is the fuel pressure sensor. Now, it doesn't look like anything that they sell at Aircraft Spruce because I didn't buy it there. I bought this, I think it was Amazon or someplace. It's a low pressure fuel rated pressure sensing unit. I tested it with the EFIS, and it does work. It shows me the pressures. I had a little pressure pump, and I pumped it up to 5 psi, and it showed 5 psi, showed 10 psi, so it seems to work. So again, because this is experimental, let's experiment. If this does not work or is not reliable, I can always remove it and install the one from Aircraft Spruce, and there we go. So this thing only cost me about 20 bucks. Including shipping. So if I have to replace it with the $80 unit from Aircraft Spruce, whatever. And of course, here is the fuel flow meter. And the plumbing, of course, involved. I've moved the fuel pump down here, the mechanical fuel pump. The electric fuel pump is down here. Okay, and it needs to be wired in as well. So yeah, today is going to be the wiring, but the plumbing, let me explain this plumbing mess here. First off, this hose down here, okay, is going to the pickup at the bottom of the tank. There is no screen on that pickup. So every bit of dirt that might get into the tank is going to get sucked into this hose. So I didn't like that. So let me rotate this around. I installed a screen here. Now this is, it's a fuel filter, but it's a metal screen, not a paper screen, and it's very porous, as is recommended by Rotax. I can't remember how many microns it is, so, but it's rather large. But that's the first thing that's going to hit, is going through this, so to prevent dirt from going into the hoses. Okay. If this gets clogged up, and it'll be part of the inspection process that I'll be doing, and just to check to this. Of course, that's with the pressure sensor. I'll notice if I got a pressure drop. First thing to look for is a blockage here that a whole bunch of dirt got in. But anyway, so it comes into here first, and hang on one second. Let's see if I can get a better angle here. Maybe. So, fuel comes out through the screen, and then it's split here. One side goes to the electric fuel pump, the other side goes to the mechanical fuel pump. Okay? For startup, of course, and when you're coming in for landing and you're playing with the throttle, you're going to turn the electric fuel pump on as a backup. And of course, then it goes through here to the mechanical fuel pump. There's the hose, the pulse hose, which is a clear hose. Mechanical fuel pump for this one is designed with 2 outputs, one for each carburetor. Inside this fuel pump, it's the same source of pressure. It's just split inside and out. They could have made a single hose and you put your own splitter on, but they split it for you to make it easier to install. I was going to simply plug one of these off and run one in, but I figured, heck with it, I'll run both inside of it. Okay, so these 2 hoses on the pressure side go into this block, which again I purchased at Aircraft Spruce. Hang on one second here. This block, so I've got the fuel coming in here. This pipe here on the back comes from the electric fuel pump, also into this manifold. This is the outlet. And of course there's a pressure sensor. So I've got pressurized fuel. When everything pressurizes, I'll see the fuel pressure here, and this manifold basically distributes it out the single pipe, which goes down and around and into the inlet of the fuel flow meter. I haven't hooked up anything to the outlet yet. I'll do that when I remount the engine so that I can cut it to the correct length. Now, originally I was thinking, hey, I'm going to put this thing at the bottom as the fuel comes out of the fuel tank. Bonus! Can't do that. According to the instructions here and a number of things that I've read up on for this particular meter, and actually probably for all of them, if you put it on the low pressure side, the suction side, there's a little wheel that spins inside here, you run the risk of producing little air bubbles and cavitations, and you get false readings. They stress very strongly this must be placed on the high pressure side, the pressurized side of your fuel system. So downstream from your fuel pump. Which means if I was going to mount this pump back where everyone else mounts it, up top of the engine, I'd have to run the hoses down and back up again, or mount this outside on the engine as well. I didn't want to do that. Likewise, these pulse pumps, in all of the documentation from Rotax, they clearly say these pumps are really good at pushing fuel uphill. They're not that great at pulling fuel uphill. And if this fuel pump were mounted at the top of the engine, well, there's a long distance from the bottom of that outlet to where the fuel pump goes. And yeah, down here, it's going to be uphill a little bit when the tank gets down, when you're down about, when you've used about a third of your tank, maybe a quarter to third of your tank. Now you're level with the pump and this starts going down. So yeah, there's going to be a bit of an uphill pull, but not much, not like before. The other criteria was this pulse hose, they're saying should be, I believe, 22 to 24 inches maximum from the engine. Over here, the length of this hose is going to be around 26 to 27 inches. I'm gambling on the fact that those extra few inches are not going to adversely affect this fuel pump, especially considering that it's now level with or just barely above the level of the fuel that it's drawing into it. It'll have more than enough pressure. Again, fuel pressure sensor, I will find out. If I have to redesign this after I've done engine run-ups and tests and all of that before I fly it, if I've got to relocate this back to where it originally was, I can do so. But right now, it's staying here with all of the rest of the fuel systems that are bolted down onto here. The electric fuel pump, of course, down there will also feed, and so I do have that backup if I get low fuel pressure from here at idle. If I'm coming in for landing, I've dropped the throttle down. Of course, one of the things of pre-landing checklist is fuel pump on. So when turning on the fuel pump, the electric fuel pump, if this does get low, I probably wouldn't notice it. So I'm gonna do some testing when I'm flying in order to establish how much of a fuel drop I get when I retard the throttle, and actually I can do that on the ground as well. So now these black plastic blocks, there's one on either side of here. There's a plastic block underneath here and a real thin one down here. The reason for those blocks is, well, first off, I needed to raise the mechanical fuel pump up so I can get the pulse hose into the inlet for that. Now, that inlet I could have put on the top, but according to the manufacturer, they say it should be at the bottom because there is a tiny, tiny hole in the bottom in case oil gets on here, that the oil leaks out and not into the fuel pump. So they say mount it with that inlet down. So in order to do that, I have to raise this up. No big deal. This is just a block of plastic that I bought. I think I bought it on Amazon or something. It was a 6x8 block that was 2 inches thick. And you just put it on the bandsaw, cut it to the sizes, drill the holes, you're done. So I thought, it'd be nice to have this manifold at a nearly the same height. It's a little low. That's okay. And likewise, this one here to about the same height as all the other hoses, just for simplicity's sake. It has no functional reason for that. It just makes it easier, and it also makes it easier on this manifold to work with these fittings, because if it was flush with here, it'd be very tough to get this hose on and off. Actually, it'd be almost impossible. I could with this because it's so tall. So this one really had to be lifted up in order to work on it and mount the hoses. So that's the plumbing out of the tank into a screen and then split between the electric fuel pump, mechanical fuel pump, through the manifold, pressure sensor, then through the fuel flow meter. Now it'll be going out to the engine. All right, follow me for a second here. When it gets to this engine, which of course is not mounted right now, when it gets to this engine, there will be a single hose, and then I will Y-split it, one to each carburetor again. The only two hoses that are going to be going down now will be a blue fuel line, okay, that goes to the fuel flow meter, that gets split to the carburetors. The other one will be the clear hose, which is the one that picks up the engine pulses to run the mechanical fuel pump. So only two hoses going down there. So in this area here, it'll be very clean. It won't have all that mess of that was here before. It was really quite the mess. If I can get a screenshot or grab a picture of what it was like, I'll put it in here right now. And if not, well, okay. So if you saw the engine before, you'll see. The electrical wiring, of course, is going to be as clean as possible with the connections from the engine and everything heading down into the space. Now, this piece of firewall, this aluminum plate, was wrapped and covered with the cloth and painted, and then this piece was just a gnarly piece of metal that was put here that looked like it was chopped out with a, well, it was kind of gnarly. And so this is, obviously I removed this, and the bottom plate here, this bottom firewall, is a nice piece. It's also covered in this cloth and painted gray. So when I put this piece back down, it'll have a nice firewall, and this piece over here will be the aluminum. I'll probably just paint it gray. It won't match, but whatever. The only drawback to doing that with the metal plate at the bottom here is the installing a heater in this aircraft for flying in the cold, cold weather. I'm thinking, because it's on floats and I have zero intention of removing it from floats, that when it gets to the freezing temperatures, I probably won't be flying this. It'll most likely be parked. That could change. I could decide, hey, I'm going to put the wheels on and fly it in the wintertime, in which case I need to then redo the heating system so I can blow hot air into the aircraft to keep me toasty warm. But at this point, I'm not going to be putting a heater into the airplane for now, and that might change. So I'm going to seal this up with the metal firewall, both sides, and there will be a hole, of course, to bring out the fuel lines and the electrical that's required to finish this off. So that's what it's going to look like. Today's project is to wire all this business up. And to clean this up a little bit, you see, I originally, hang on a second, there. I put this clip here onto this metal plate with the tie strap to hold the wiring harness up here. I don't like that. It's in the way. So I'm going to put let's see if I can get an angle on this. There's one of the tubes here and the thinner tube here. I think I'm going to put a thin aluminum plate along here and then mount this wiring harness onto that plate to hold it out of the way and then run the wiring out. But I want to get it away from back here. So yeah, so I'm going to be putting aluminum plate down here somewhere, and that's going to be part of the project for finishing the electrical. So that's the update for right now, and yeah, now we're getting on to the building montage. I'm going to switch this thing to time-lapse mode, and we'll see how things go. Hopefully it captures, or I can mount this camera somehow. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to mount this so you can watch what I'm doing down here. I'm thinking I might just use duct tape and tape it to this engine bracket. That'd be a nice look-down view, I think. You know, like that. Maybe. Because I don't have a tripod tall enough or whatever to bring the camera up to this height. So I'll figure it out, you know, and we'll see. So thanks for tuning in. Follow along. Next will be kind of a time-lapse of me doing the wiring. Okay, before I get into that part, here's a picture of the front of the fuel tank with the battery tray seat down. You'll notice there is an angle aluminum in the front of the tank. It's something I just needed to add here, just to let you know that I added that piece because I felt that the tank could have slid forward at some time and there was nothing holding it back. So that's just an addition to that fuel tank installation. Okay, brief update. I'm going to be moving this wiring harness off to the side, as I mentioned earlier, I believe. But in order to do that, to move it from here to the side, I had to make a little plate. So, got the two holes drilled, just need to put one rivet in there. And then I put some lined nuts, riv nuts, in place so that I can screw the little tie straps to hold the wiring harness on here on the side. I'll show you in a picture after. So, but I'm just going to be riveting this on here right now.
What follows is a brief construction montage.
Okay, and now we're into the warp speed part. Sorry about that brief interruption with that angle aluminum at the front of the tank, but I kind of figured you kind of needed that. So here we go. I'm drilling those holes to mount that metal strap that had those riv nuts on there, and that's what's going to be holding the wiring harness from the front of the aircraft to the back of the engine. It'll be holding it off to the left-hand side underneath the firewall there, which is the port side for those who are keeping track of port and starboard. Left is port. So here we go. I'm putting the tie straps. Now I've got these tie straps that I purchased at one of my wholesalers that have holes in the side, like a loop in it, so that the actual tie strap can be fastened directly to a metal plate, and I'm using those, yeah, it's just keeping it off to the side rather than in the middle, because it was inconvenient where I first put it. So now you're going to see I've got a soldering iron in my hand. Yes, every connection back here was not crimped and all that. It was soldered, and I used heat shrink tubing on all my connections, with one exception, was where I crimped on ring terminals and fastened them all as part of the grounding. Like the grounding lines were on ring terminals which were crimped on. But everything else, every wire-to-wire connection is soldered. And then there's a heat shrink tubing that was placed over top that. And you'll see, okay, I'm using a lighter to melt the heat shrink tubing. I also go to a heat gun a little later because it was just a little more convenient. And yes, it's okay for me to use a lighter right now because there is absolutely no fuel in the tank. It's a brand new tank, brand new lines, brand new everything. There's no fuel back there. If this were a live system, like if the fuel tank had fuel in it, I wouldn't be using a lighter. I'm really not that silly. So yeah, it's soldered and heat shrunk connections, and yeah, the reason I did that, I just didn't want anything coming loose. I didn't want any chance of something coming loose, and I used heat shrink instead of black tape because I wanted a secure seal around those connections as well. I didn't want sparks. I didn't want anything. I was shocked at how this aircraft was wired originally, and the fellow I bought it from, it's not his fault. He bought it like that as well. It goes back to the original builder in 2002. I don't know who that was, but that's I believe where that wiring came from. And really, if you're not experienced in doing wiring, you know, and you kind of wing it, I can see how you would do something with this, and you would think that wrapping something in black tape is you know, enough, but no. This was brought up to a much more professional level. So there we go. Oh, there's the blue heat shrink tubing gun. All of this work, by the way, that you're looking at took, the video that I edited and sped up and chopped and trimmed and whatnot was over 2 hours of video, but in reality it was about 3 hours in the hangar to get all of this done. To get all the wire trimming and measuring it and getting it to the right length and verifying the color codes and everything else. So what I still haven't done yet, which I've got to do, which I won't be putting on camera, is my as-built drawings. I am going to be putting together as-built so that each wire will have a label on it, and there will be a set of as-built drawings which will describe what the wire does, where it starts, where it ends, all that kind of stuff for this. So troubleshooting is sometime in the future. You'll simply grab the binder for the aircraft, and it'll have a legend of all the wiring, what color code was used for what it does, all of that, and any other notes that may be relevant to it, as in maybe there's a splice or a plug halfway in between or something to locate that. So as-built are still have to be done, which is going to be a daunting task, especially considering my instrument panel. There's a lot of as-built and a lot of schematic drawings that need to be finalized for all of that. And I am going to have to go back and say, how did I do this again? Although I kept documentation of everything as I was building it, occasionally right in the hangar I said, oh no, that's not quite right, I'm going to make a quick change here. So I made that change. So before I finalize my documentation, I've got to trace every single line out and just verify, okay, what did I change and why did I change it, and make note of it. And so my final drawings will reflect exactly what is being done in the aircraft. I'm doing that for my case, my sanity. In 2 or 3 years' time, if I got to find a fault, do you think I'm going to remember how I did something? Nah, probably not. As a matter of fact, I can guarantee I wouldn't. So a set of as-built drawings is absolutely critical if you're going to be wiring up an aircraft. Even if it's just a couple of wires, you need to label it and you need to document it, and you need to keep that updated if you make changes. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this this little montage of me soldering and heat shrinking and getting the wiring together. So this is it. One take, and no cuts, no breaks in this narration. I hope I did a decent job. We'll find out in a few minutes. There I am putting the grounding wires down on the ring terminals. So back to the normal speed.
We hope you enjoyed this brief construction montage.
Okay, well, I've got all the wiring done. I think if the sped up time-lapse thing works, then you'll have seen me solder and heat shrink and wrap and strap and all that good stuff. So it's a bit of a mess. Let's turn it around here. It's still a little bit of a mess. It needs to be secured properly. You know, a little couple tie straps here and there, secure everything down. And of course, then I've got these wires here which go to the engine. That's the cylinder head temperature and exhaust gas temperature, one for each cylinder. There's 4 of them. And then of course I've got the, this is the line for the stator and for the tachometer. It comes out over here. And this is, there they go. This is, of course, the mags. Well, it's not really mags, they're coils, but it's a dual ignition. This is the kill for the ignitions, so that when you start it up, you can check, make sure they're both working. And yeah, so I won't get into too much detail with that, but so yeah, these wires here belong to the engine. That's it. And then there's a fuel hose that goes to the engine. The pulse hose for the mechanical fuel pump, and the electric fuel pump's down there, of course. And then of course, naturally, I've got these 2 big cables. That's the starter motor, and this is the ground from the battery. Now, there's also a ground here on the frame from the battery. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this and fasten it to the same line here for the ground. Because originally the frame of the aircraft was used as a common ground, which works fine. But I'm old school, and I like to see a line from my battery to the engine, to the starter motor specifically. Because if there's ever a loose rivets or loose bolts along the way, and eventually things get loosened up, yeah, I don't know. It's just, maybe I'm being overly cautious. Probably. But that's okay. It's my airplane. I can be overly cautious with my airplane. So there we go. Wiring is done. Plumbing is done. Just need to strap and clean up. And this part will be complete. Thank you very much for following along. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. Depends on the editing and how much verbiage and yak I have, because I'm prone to that, as some of you may have noticed. Great. Once again, thanks for following along. I do appreciate it. I do read all the comments, especially, you know, at the early stages of my YouTube posting. I get notices for every time someone comments. And with the viewer count being low right now, maybe it's not by the time this one drops. I don't know. But I am responding to all comments, and I do see all the comments, and I do read all the comments, and I will respond to all questions. So leave a comment, click that like button. I know it's one of those things that people say, "Oh, do I have to?" Yeah, please just click the like button, even if you don't comment. And if you subscribe, that'd be even better. Hey, that's about it. God bless. Keep your stick on the ice, and we'll see you again in the hangar. Bye-bye.
I hope this was educational and informative. If you've got any questions, comment. I will answer any questions that you've got. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again in the hangar. Bye-bye.